My parents skipped the most important event of my life to go watch my younger brother's football game, and they only realized it was my wedding when the photos started blowing up online. Right after that, my dad lost it and threatened my mom with divorce. My mom completely fell apart. My cousins, aunts, uncles, everyone was furious. And now my entire family has shattered into pieces. Hi, Reddit. I'm Elias Carter, 28 years old. I have a stable job. I'm married, and I've built the life I have today with my own two hands. But if you asked my mom who her proudest child is, it definitely wouldn't be me. My younger brother, Bryce, 22, showed up in our family like a blazing meteor that everyone decided was the center of the universe. My mom, Deborah, went from being a normal mom who used to cover the entire fridge with my science fair projects to the kind of parent who lives and breathes her youngest son's football stats. I still remember when I was little, she'd take me to science fairs, help me glue models together, clap like crazy for my third grade presentation. But from the moment Bryce arrived, I slowly started disappearing from family photos, like I became nothing more than the blurry background behind his spotlight. I put myself through college with part-time jobs, never asked them for a single dollar, and now I have a solid career. Yet every time my mom brags about her kids, the story always starts and ends with Bryce like I don't even exist. My dad, Richard, 53, never yelled at me, but he also never once stood up for me against my mom's blatant favoritism. He'd just stand there with his hands in his pockets, silently watching her cheer for Bryce like he was already headed to the NFL. The only person who ever called this out was my grandfather, Frank, 78. Even though he lives 3 hours away, he calls me every week and always says straight up that my mom is so obsessed with Bryce she can't see anyone else. One Christmas, he said it to her face, and she didn't speak to him for months. The thing that hurt the most? My maternal grandparents had set up a college fund just for me. During my sophomore year, there was a kitchen fire, and mom said they had to use the fund to cover repairs. I believed her. Years later, I found out most of that money actually went toward Bryce's first car and the deposit on his college apartment. While I was working two jobs to pay rent, Bryce was treated like royalty. A lot of people ask why I didn't cut contact sooner. The truth is, for years I kept trying to become the son they could be proud of. I thought if I just achieved enough, they'd finally see me. It never happened. The only person who ever made me feel truly valued was Grandpa Frank. When I graduated, he sent me a handwritten letter with a crisp $100 bill that said, "Every man deserves a cold drink the day he walks off that graduation stage." I still have that letter. I met my wife, Hannah, when we both worked at the university library. She's seen everything from the very beginning. My freshman year, my parents came to my college town exactly once, not for me, but because Bryce's team had a game nearby. They never even called me. I only knew they'd been there because I saw them check in on Facebook. Meanwhile, Hannah's family showed up for every little thing: tiny art exhibitions, random presentations. At first, I thought it was weird. Then it just made me sad. The real story started last year when Bryce posted a party video on Instagram with the caption, "Some people chase real dreams. Some just sit at a desk pretending they matter. Guess who mom's proud of?" My mom hearted it immediately. Relatives laughed along. One cousin even tagged me with the eye emoji. That was the first time something inside me truly broke, not out of anger, but because I finally understood my place in the family had been publicly and officially declared. I stayed silent, didn't comment, didn't text. But I knew that moment would lead to something bigger. And it did. My parents skipped my wedding to prioritize Bryce one more time, simply because they never bothered to ask what the very important event was that I had begged them to attend. When the wedding photos went viral and my whole family exploded into chaos, I just stood there watching, sad, yes, but also relieved. Because finally, everything that had been hidden for so long was out in the open. 28 years waiting to be seen, and I got exactly what I'd always feared. In their eyes, I was never the child worth choosing. But this time, unlike all the times before, I don't feel small anymore. If you want, I'll write the next part. The family confrontation, or the moment Hannah stood up for me. Just say the word. Even people I hadn't spoken to in years saw that post. An old high school friend actually messaged me, "Holy shit, your brother is such an asshole." I just replied with two words. Yeah, whatever. Because honestly, there was nothing left to say. This wasn't the first time Bryce had acted like that. He's always been this way. If he wasn't bragging about his football stats, it was the car mom bought him when he was 17, or the apartment my parents paid the deposit for right next to his campus. I still remember one Thanksgiving when he literally stood up at the dinner table and lectured me about how I should aim higher than average, while my parents sat there nodding like he was dropping some profound wisdom. I didn't respond online because reacting would only make me look defensive. I have a good job, so what? Saying anything would just make it seem like I was trying to compete with him. So I stayed quiet and kept focusing on my own work. At the time, I was leading a small product team at a mid-sized tech company. We'd been grinding for months on a big regional client deal, and that exact week, we finally closed it. The team got bonuses, and I got promoted. It wasn't flashy like a highlight reel touchdown, but in my world, it was a real win. I didn't post about it. I just told Hannah and called Grandpa Frank. He was thrilled like I'd just won the Super Bowl. In that calm voice I'll never forget, he said, "Keep winning your way, son. They'll see it eventually, even if they're pretending to be blind." That same week, Bryce slid into my Instagram DMs with a short, punctuation-free message that was pure him. "You could have been somebody. If you tried harder, don't blame mom for picking the winner." I stared at it for a long time, typed chill, then deleted it. In the end, I didn't reply at all. He saw that I read it and sent a smirking emoji. That night, Hannah accidentally saw the message while we were watching TV. She asked if I was okay. I just said, "Yeah, what else is there to say?" Honestly, none of it surprised me anymore. The next morning, Grandpa Frank called after one of my cousins told him about the post. He was angry in that quiet way only he can be: slow, deliberate words. Like if he spoke any faster, he'd start yelling. He just said, "Son, don't answer him. Build your life. Let the scoreboard speak for itself." I told him about the promotion. He said he wished he lived closer so we could go celebrate properly. Then he asked about Hannah, how she was doing, and whether we had set a wedding date yet because by then we were engaged, but we were keeping everything super quiet. We didn't want drama or anyone inserting themselves. When we finally picked the date, a Saturday in fall, in the backyard of Hannah's aunt, I sent a group text to my parents and Bryce. "I have a very important event this fall, October 14th. I really hope you can be there. The date is locked. It can't be moved." Mom replied almost instantly, "That's Bryce's last regular season game before playoffs. We'll be there cheering him on." I didn't explain. I didn't correct her. I didn't say another word. If they cared, they would ask. But they didn't ask. Hannah asked if I wanted to tell them it was the wedding. I said no. If they cared, they'd find out. If they didn't, well, the answer was already clear. Meanwhile, Bryce's Instagram post faded after a couple of weeks. People moved on. He went back to posting game clips, and Mom shared every single one with, "So proud of my boy." Same as always. Every Sunday, Grandpa Frank would call, ask about work, ask about Hannah, ask about life. He never brought up the old stuff again. Just reminded me to let him know the big day so he could get his best suit ready. The one he hadn't worn since Grandma's funeral. He said it was time that suit saw a happy day again. I sent him the date. He wrote it on the calendar next to his fridge and told me nothing on earth would make him miss it. My parents, on the other hand, never asked a single follow-up question. That's why, to them, October 14th was always just Bryce's game, not my wedding day. To explain why the wedding turned out the way it did, I probably need to go back to how I proposed to Hannah. It was last March. We took a weekend trip to a little cabin 2 hours outside the city. Nothing fancy, just quiet woods, hiking trails, and a calm lake. I'd been carrying the ring in my pocket for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment. I'm not great with big speeches, so I figured simple and honest would be enough. Saturday morning, we were hiking up a trail to an overlook above the lake. It was early, no one else around, just a light breeze and total silence except my heart pounding. I pulled the ring box from my jacket, turned to her, and did my best to tell her I wanted her by my side for the rest of my life. In every chapter of my life, I wanted her walking right beside me, that was it. My proposal was so simple, my hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the box. Hannah lit up with the brightest smile, nodded instantly, and hugged me so hard I nearly lost my balance for a second. No audience, no cameras, just the two of us, and a few birds chirping somewhere up in the trees. When we got back, I called my parents to tell them the news. Mom's exact words were, "Oh, that's nice." And then she immediately started talking about Bryce's off-season tournament. Dad mumbled, "Congrats, son." And that was the entire reaction. Hannah didn't say anything right then, but that night she asked if that was normal. I told her, it's fine, even though deep down I knew it wasn't. For the next few months, every time we saw my parents, Mom only talked about practice schedules, stats, and Bryce's chances of making the playoffs. Not one person asked about our wedding plans, not even a polite, how's it going? Then, sometime in the summer, I found out something else that made everything crystal clear. A cousin told me my parents had paid for Bryce's new sports agent and an elite out of state training camp an insane amount of money. I asked Bryce how he was affording it. My cousin looked at me like I'd asked the dumbest question on earth and said, Uh, your parents are covering it? You didn't know? No. I didn't know. Apparently, they'd drained the last of the old emergency fund, the one that was supposed to have whatever was left of my college money for grad school. Gone. I just sat there for a minute. I wasn't angry or shocked anymore. At that point, it wasn't even about the money. It was the unspoken rule of my family. Everything belongs to Bryce. I get the scraps. I didn't fight anyone about it. I didn't bring it up with my parents. I just told Hannah, and we decided we weren't waiting for anyone else to be excited for us. We did it all ourselves. We picked October 14th because it was the only fall weekend Hannah's aunt's backyard was free. A big, beautiful garden with string lights, simple wooden tables and chairs, a small dance floor, and an incredible view of the hills in the distance, perfect for the kind of wedding we actually wanted. Private, low-key, and only for the people who truly mattered. We invited about 60 people, close friends, a few of Hannah's relatives, my grandpa Frank, and 2 or 3 cousins I still talk to. I called Grandpa and asked if he would walk me down the aisle, because I already knew my parents either wouldn't want to or simply wouldn't care. He went quiet for a second, then said in a thick voice that it would be the greatest honor of his life. While we were planning, my mom kept posting on Facebook about Bryce's upcoming games, sharing every highlight reel, talking about scouts who might show up. Not a single word about me. No congratulations, no questions, nothing. Dad stayed silent, like he always does when it comes to me. By September, everything for the wedding was done. Hannah and her aunt handled decorations. I took care of the guest list and food. My parents never once asked how preparations were going. At the end of September, Bryce sent me a text that managed to be both clueless and condescending at the same time. Hope everything goes smooth. Mom says it's the same day as my game. Bad timing, haha. I didn't reply. Looking back, that was probably the moment I realized I wasn't expecting anything from them anymore. October 14th came faster than I thought. The night before, we stayed at Hannah's aunt's house to make things easier. Her family was incredible in ways I can't even describe. They hung lights, set up tables, tied flowers, fixed every tiny detail for us. That morning, when the sun came up, the backyard looked so perfect I just stood there staring for a long time, completely speechless. It wasn't some fancy ballroom wedding, but it felt right, warm, intimate, ours. Around noon, guests started arriving. College friends flew in from 3 different states. 2 cousins drove 6 hours to be there. They asked if my parents were coming. I just said, no, they're busy. Nobody pushed, and I knew they understood. Then Grandpa Frank showed up in his old dark suit, pressed perfectly, looking so sharp I almost laughed. He walked straight over, hugged me tight, and handed me a small box. Your grandma wanted you to have this, he said. Inside was her pendant, the one she'd saved for the grandchild who, in his words, loved this family the way this family should have loved him. I just nodded. My throat was so tight I didn't trust myself to speak. The ceremony started at 2 p.m. Grandpa Frank took my arm and walked me down the aisle under the twinkling string lights to the arch, while Hannah's dad brought her out from the back of the yard. Our best friend Amanda officiated. Her voice is low and warm, so even though she usually just reads poetry at little open mic nights, everything felt properly solemn. We kept the vows short. Neither of us wanted to drag that moment out any longer than it needed to be. It was already perfect just looking at to each other. When Amanda pronounced us married, everyone cheered at once. Someone popped confetti cannons, colored paper exploded into the afternoon sky, and the DJ immediately dropped the song Hannah played on repeat all through college. After the ceremony came photos. We had a pro photographer, but everyone was taking their own shots too. My 2 cousins wanted a big family photo, and right as we were lining up, someone asked where my parents were. I just said, Bryce had a game. They couldn't make it. A few relatives exchanged looks, but nobody pushed it. At one point, Grandpa Frank leaned in and whispered, firm but quiet, they're going to regret this one day. Dinner was a simple buffet. Grilled meats, pasta, salad, nothing fancy, but people went back for seconds. Hannah's aunt knows a caterer who does great food for cheap, so it all stayed in budget. We paid for the entire wedding ourselves. No loans, not a single dollar from my parents, just the huge gift of Aunt Hannah letting us use her backyard. While everyone was eating, my dad's sister Linda snapped a few pictures and posted them on Facebook. I didn't think much of it. I barely touched my phone that day. We'd planned to go completely offline right after the reception anyway. After dinner came the first dance. Then the floor opened up. Kids ran around the fence playing tag, adults laughed and talked, and people stayed late into the night. It was exactly the wedding I'd always pictured. Close, warm, full of people who actually wanted to be there for us. Around 9, things started winding down. Guests trickled out. My college friends kept trying to help clean up, but Aunt Hannah shooed them away. She said she'd handle it tomorrow. Grandpa Frank hugged us both and joked, "I haven't danced in 20 years. My back's gonna make me pay tomorrow." But damn, it was worth it. We laughed and promised to call him after the honeymoon. Our honeymoon plan was simple. Leave the next morning for a week. No phones, no email, no internet. Just the two of us and some quiet mountain towns. Before bed, I glanced at my phone one last time. Dozens of notifications from relatives reacting to Aunt Linda's post. A couple messages saying things like, "Your mom's comments are on fire right now." I turned the phone face down and decided whatever it was could wait until we got back. The next morning, we loaded the car, said goodbye to Aunt Hannah, and drove off. Leaving everything behind for a while felt so good. Like dropping a weight I'd been carrying for years. 7 days of no calls, no texts, no demands, no drama. Just us, cool mountain roads, little roadside cafes, and quiet evenings I hadn't had in forever. I still didn't know it yet, but while we were gone, Aunt Linda's Facebook post had started spreading through the small town where my parents live. Old family, friends, former neighbors, high school classmates, even people from their church were sharing it, commenting, asking why my parents weren't at their own son's wedding. By the time we got home, it had blown up like wildfire. A week later, the first time I turned my phone back on after the wedding, the notifications came flooding in. Missed calls, voicemails, Facebook tags. So many the phone almost froze. I thought someone had died or something terrible had happened. But when I opened Messenger, it was all about Aunt Linda's post. She'd put up 10 photos. Me and Hannah during the ceremony, Grandpa Frank raising a toast, guests dancing, and captioned it, "A beautiful day celebrating Elias and Hannah." Some people chose different priorities, but everyone who was here made it a night to remember. That one line, "Some people chose different priorities," was the match that lit the whole thing. In the little world I grew up in, people started sharing it with comments like, "Wait, his parents weren't there?" And, "Didn't they miss his graduation too?" Some even tagged my mom directly, asking if it was true. By the time I scrolled through, it had spread across every local group, old neighbors, people who watched me grow up. Not millions of views, but in my parents' small corner of the universe, everybody knew. Under Aunt Linda's photos, my mom left exactly one comment. "He never told us it was his wedding." And instantly, everyone jumped in to point out that she had also never asked. Exactly. That was the entire problem. Meanwhile, my inbox exploded with messages from Mom, flipping from rage to pleading in just a few hours. The first ones were classic fury. "How dare you humiliate us like this? Your aunt had no right to post that. You should have told us it was a wedding." As if she wasn't the one who ignored my message for months. A few hours later, the tone completely changed. "Call your mother. We need to talk. People won't stop messaging me. I didn't sleep all night. This is tearing the family apart." While Mom was spiraling, Bryce kept texting in his usual smug way. "Nice play, bro. Did you set this up just to make Mom look bad? Kinda sad you had to sneak around for your little wedding." As if I was the villain here. I didn't reply to anyone. But the real blow came from Grandpa Frank. While we were still on our honeymoon, he got in his car, drove the full 3 hours to my parents' house, and made them sit down in the living room. My cousin who lives nearby saw the whole thing. Grandpa didn't yell, but what he said shut everyone up. He looked at my dad and told him he was ashamed of how everything had turned out. Then he said, "You let that woman drag this whole family down while your son learned not to expect anything from you anymore." My cousin said Dad just sat there like a statue, face white, like someone had pulled the plug on his whole body. After Grandpa left, Dad called me. I was still unpacking, so it went to voicemail. In the message, His voice was shaking. He said he was sorry, that he felt sick for missing the wedding, that he knew he'd failed as a father. He ended with, either things were going to change, or he was done with everything. It felt surreal. In my entire life, he'd barely spoken. Hearing him like that hurt and relieved me at the same time. Mom, of course, didn't stop. After the rage came the guilt trip texts. I'm your mother. I deserve a chance to explain. Then, you have no idea how hard this is for me. And finally, she tried throwing Dad under the bus. He's saying crazy things. That's not what he really means. By the weekend, she was straight up begging. Please don't cut us off. I'll do anything to fix this. Meanwhile, Aunt Linda messaged me, apologizing, saying she never expected the post to blow up. She just wanted to celebrate us. I told her it wasn't her fault at all. Then other relatives started calling. A few, especially Mom's sisters, were furious at me for making Mom look bad. They said she was devastated, crying all day, mortified in front of her friends. I told them straight, she embarrassed herself by skipping her son's wedding for a football game. That's it. Dad's side of the family was the complete opposite. Most of them backed me. A couple cousins even commented publicly under Aunt Linda's photos. Elias deserved better. About time someone said it. Things got worse when the big game my parents chose over my wedding turned out to be a disaster. Bryce threw 2 pick sixes, got benched in the second quarter. His team barely snuck into playoffs on a tiebreaker and got crushed in the first round the next week. People online started joking that he made his parents miss their son's wedding for a total train wreck performance. Some of his own teammates dropped laughing emojis under the posts. Bryce sent me one last angry text, blaming me for cursing his whole season with my drama. I read it, and still didn't reply. By the end of the weekend, Dad texted again, this time asking to meet in person. He said he wanted to talk man to man and didn't want Mom there. I agreed, but only after telling Hannah everything. She squeezed my hand and said she'd back whatever I decided, but she didn't want them to make me feel guilty ever again. That was the moment I realized. Things were about to get messier before they got better, but maybe that was exactly what had to happen. Dad picked a diner 2 towns over, said he wanted a place where no one we knew could overhear. When I walked in, he was already in a back booth with a black coffee in front of him. No food, no sugar. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in just a couple of weeks. The second I sat down, he didn't waste a breath. I owe you an apology, he said, staring into the coffee like looking at me was too hard. I stayed quiet and let him keep going. I should have been at your wedding. I should have been at your graduations, your events. I let your mother call every shot because I was afraid of fighting. Thought keeping the peace made me a good dad. It didn't. It was the most direct thing he'd ever said to me. He told me that after Grandpa Frank's visit, he'd spent a whole week on the couch, unable to look at Mom without hearing Grandpa's words on repeat. Grandpa had told him straight up that he'd failed as both a son and a father, and it crushed him worse than he expected. Dad said he wanted to start making it right not with words, but with real actions. He wanted to go to therapy. He wanted to pay back every dollar that had been taken from my college fund, even if it took years. He said he was done letting Mom's excuses run everything. I didn't write every check, he said, but I let it happen. And I'm sorry. I told him I heard the apology, but this wasn't something a few checks and therapy sessions could fix overnight. He nodded immediately, said he knew, and that he was ready to prove it with time. We sat in silence for a long time, not sure what came next. When the waitress came by, he ordered pie for both of us like he was trying to lighten the air. I didn't want any, but I ate it anyway, probably just so the moment wouldn't feel even heavier. 2 days later, Mom texted saying she wanted to meet just the 2 of us this time. I knew I couldn't face her alone, so Hannah came with me. We met at the same diner. Mom looked wrecked, eyes swollen, hair a mess, like she hadn't slept in a week. She started the second she sat down. You never told us it was a wedding. If you had told us, we would have been there. I looked her dead in the eye and said I had invited them to a very important event, and she never once asked what it was because to her, Bryce's game was automatically more important. She tried arguing it was just a misunderstanding, that she assumed whatever I was talking about wasn't a big deal because I hadn't made it clear. I told her, that's the whole problem. I was never important enough for you to even ask. She started crying loud, messy sobs that soaked through the napkins faster than she could grab them. The waitress kept glancing over. Mom said she thought she was just supporting the child who needed it most, that Bryce's career had real potential and she wanted to give him everything. I told her straight, she wasn't supporting him. She was obsessed with him to the point of forgetting she had another son. I listed it all: the college fund, graduations, birthdays she skipped, parent teacher nights, every memory she wasn't part of. I laid it out so she couldn't pretend this was just about the wedding. She kept saying sorry, over and over. I told her apologies don't erase years of choosing wrong. Dad stayed quiet most of the time, but when Mom finally stopped talking for a second, he said he was starting therapy and she should too. He said things were changing whether she liked it or not. By the end of the meal, I told them I wasn't cutting contact, but I also wasn't pretending everything was fine. If they wanted a relationship with me, it would take real time, real effort, and no more one-sided excuses. Mom nodded through tears. Dad looked exhausted, like he'd aged another 5 years in an hour, but he said he understood. The next day, Bryce texted and asked to meet up. Just the two of us. We picked a park near my apartment. He showed up in his team hoodie, hands in his pockets, looking annoyed like he just wanted this over with. The second he sat on the bench, he started venting. Scout pressure, coach pressure, how his whole season had collapsed, how the wedding thing got blown way out of proportion. I told him this happened because for years our parents acted like I didn't exist, while he kept rubbing everything in my face like I was supposed to be proud of it. Bryce said, he never asked to be the favorite. I said, yeah, but you sure enjoyed it. Just kicked at the gravel and muttered, now everybody hates me because of this. I told him people don't hate him. They hate what he represents. A family that put one kid on a throne and left the other one in the dirt. He asked if we were okay. I said we're not enemies, but we're also not brothers. At least not right now. He had nothing to say after that. When I got home, Grandpa Frank called. I told him the whole conversation. He said he was proud of me for staying calm and not getting dragged into another fight. Keep your word, he said, and let time show who was right. 2 days later, my boss called me into the office and offered me the lead on a brand new product line. More work, bigger responsibility, better pay. I accepted. For the first time in weeks, I felt like my life was actually moving forward while everyone else was still stuck in the mess they made. By the time winter rolled around, things had settled down for me. Hannah and I moved into a bigger apartment closer to work, and I started the new role. The higher salary meant we could finally start saving for a house, instead of just talking about it someday. Dad kept his word. Every month he sent me a small check labeled college fund repayment. Sometimes $20, sometimes $50. Not a lot. But the point was he was actually doing something instead of just talking. He'd include little notes like month 1 or long road ahead. The money wasn't the issue anymore. It was the fact that for the first time, he was taking initiative. He also told me he'd started therapy. Said it felt weird at first, but at least he was learning how to speak up instead of staying quiet to keep the peace. I didn't pry, just told him I was glad he was doing it. According to Dad, Mom had gone with him a few times. The therapist apparently told her straight up that she had to stop living through Bryce and face the damage she'd done. I don't know if she really heard it. She texted me a few more apologies. I didn't answer right away. When I finally did, I only said one thing. I'm done hearing sorry. I want to see real effort. If she wants a relationship with me, she has to stop acting like nothing ever happened and start showing me things are actually different. She said she understood. I'm not sure she truly does, but at least after all these years, our conversations stopped being about her crying and started being about what she's going to do next. Bryce pretty much went radio silent after the park. He had a terrible end to the season. Knocked out in the first playoff round, no scouts called like everyone expected, and he finally stopped posting his usual bragging crap. Probably got tired of people clowning on him for making his parents miss my wedding for a game he choked in anyway. The only time he texted me after that was in December, whining that the whole family still sees him as the villain. I told him the truth. That's because he acted like one for years. He said, that's not fair. But that's reality. I told Bryce that, to be honest, I'd rather have parents who actually cared about me than ones who spent their whole lives bragging about his football stats. After that, he went completely silent. No reply. Not a single word. And that was the first time I realized the distance between us wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a truth that had been there for a very long time. That Christmas, Dad came to visit alone. Mom said she stayed home because she didn't want to make things awkward, but I knew the real reason wasn't any prettier. He brought Hannah, Nora, a small gift, an actual baking set she'd been needing, and a framed wedding photo he'd had printed. He said Aunt Linda sent it to him to pass along to us. It was the first time in years Dad had given me something that felt personal. Nothing flashy, nothing big, just a simple frame, but it shut me up for a second. We had lunch, talked about work, about Grandpa Frank coming in the spring. No blame, no heavy air. Just three adults sitting together, trying to relearn how to be family. When Dad got up to leave, he looked at me and said, "I'm proud of you." It was so short, I could have blinked and missed it, but it was the sentence I'd never heard once my entire childhood. By February, Hannah and I started house hunting online. No rush, no pressure. Just two grown adults finally able to think about the future without worrying that one phone call from my family would ruin the whole day. My job was going great. Hannah was picking up more photography clients. For the first time, life felt like ours instead of something constantly pulled off course by the family hurricane. In March, Grandpa Frank came to visit. We drove him to a big park with a lake, walking trails, and trees just starting to bud. He used a cane, but still walked farther than I thought he could. He said the spring air made him feel like he was still really alive. When we sat on a bench overlooking the water, he told me he was proud of how I'd handled everything. That a lot of people would have either exploded or cut everyone off. But I drew boundaries and held them. And that's stronger than screaming every single time. He told me about the first time he ever stood up to his own father when he was young. Said it didn't fix everything overnight, but it forced people to finally see him differently. On the drive back, a strange feeling crept into my chest. Relief. Not perfect, not complete, but quiet. Life was no longer about explosions, endless text walls, or fights that always circled back to Bryce. I just kept moving forward. A week later, I posted one wedding photo on my personal page. Just me, Hannah, and Grandpa Frank standing under the string lights in the backyard. One line underneath. I'm okay. I'm building what's mine, with the people who actually showed up. No hashtags, no explanation. Comments turned off. I posted it, set the phone down, sat next to Hannah and Grandpa on the couch, and watched the sunset come through the window. And for the first time in years, I felt like my life had finally come back to where it was supposed to be.